So this evening I'm going to be talking to you about the West Oxfordshire Farmland bird project, which myself and a few other volunteers helped to set up around 6 years ago. So we're based over part of West Oxfordshire. Around 19 farms were involved in the project, and we set up in around 2016 and 2017. So we've got four main aims that we work on. The first is to reverse farmland bird declines through engagement with farmers and landowners. In the short term, this sort of work involves supplementary feeding, provision of nest boxes, and in the long term, the improvement of habitat through engaging and advising farmers. The second aim is to bring back tree sparrow populations from the brink in West Oxfordshire. And this is through nest box provision, supplementary feeding, to aid their expansion from current populations still strong and healthy in Wiltshire and the north of the county. The third aim, and the one I'll be talking to most this evening, is to monitor farmland bird population trends as part of British Trust for Ornithology surveys. This includes bird ringing, nest recording and observational counts, the data from which we send directly to the farmers and landowners. The fourth and final is to conserve breeding barn owl populations in partnership with the Oxfordshire Ornithological Society, who already have a very successful project going nearby. And we do this through the provision of nest boxes and, again, improvement of habitat, for example, providing undisturbed rough grassland for the optimal foraging. So why monitor farmland birds? What's the point? So since 1966, 44 million birds have been lost in the UK countryside, quite a staggering figure. And as you can see from the different groups, wetland, seabirds, woodland and farmland have suffered the most severe declines. And the data that we collect helps to figure out why these birds have declined and to what degree. So it's very important to collect data first, and then we can work out how to reverse these declines. To focus in on farmland birds, grey partridges, turtle doves and tree sparrows and corn buntings have declined by over 90%, quite a worrying statistic. Over half of the farmland species showing decreasing trends have declined by over 50%. So all very worrying statistics. Obviously we have to act quick to reverse these declines. And tree sparrow population as one of our target species, as you can see, mostly declined around 1970s, 1980s due to things like the Green Revolution, conversion of semi-natural land to cultivated land, increasing use of agrochemicals, highly efficient harvesting, and also Dutch elm disease, which removed a lot of their nesting habitat. But also due to Dutch elm disease, a lot of farmers were able to cut hedgerows back as there were no longer these large elm disease, and that again removed their nesting habitat. And also reduction in mixed farming has also led partly to their decline. So, the monitoring methods that we use: bird ringing, nest recording and observational counts. And as I said, this is all as part of the BTO survey schemes. So the first, bird ringing. This is a corn bunting, I think the first corn bunting that we ringed as part of the project. You can see this uniquely coded colouring, and I'll go into this in a bit more detail towards the end of this section. So what does bird ringing entail? It sounds a bit weird, but we capture the birds using mist nets and we ring them. This is all under licence, it's quite strict licensing. And we also ring chicks that we find in nests. Each bird is fitted with a uniquely coded metal ring, and then the bird is aged and sexed if possible. The wing length and weight are taken, and other measurements such as hind claws skylarks or the tail length of swallows or corn buntings is often taken for different birds. So what can bird ringing provide that observational counts can't? As I said, we also do observational counts. Well, by giving each bird an identity, an individual bird, we can get an idea of adult survival, post-fledgling survival, migration and dispersal, individual health of each bird through taking the wing and weight, and also site fidelity. And this is because we can recapture birds that have already been ringed, and we can see where they've come from. And all this data helps to provide probable causes of declines, and then we can work with farmers to help to reverse these declines. So for example, in Wiltshire, Matt Pryor, who's quite a well-known conservationist for tree sparrows, does carry out birding alongside his conservation work, and he found that when he started to feed throughout the summer as well as the winter, providing millet and feeders, winter survival and post-fledgling survival all went up. So this data can provide good evidence for what work is working in the field for tree sparrows. And in Oxfordshire, we have found a lot of movements and migration on many of our farms. So yellowhammers have moved 8 kilometres between farms and to Wiltshire. We've had rebunting movements of up to 136 kilometres away. And then perhaps the most impressive, we've had chaffinches overwintering on one of the farms from Holland and Denmark, so 2 birds. We've also had linnets that have turned up in Yorkshire, having ringed them down here. So colouring in corn buntings, I said on the first slide, you could see these uniquely coded yellow rings. Now, corn buntings are very difficult to recapture once you've ringed them. They're very wary birds. They know their environment very well because they're resident. So if they see anything that looks a bit out of the ordinary, so humans or mist nets that we use to catch them, they'll quickly scarper and they'll go elsewhere to feed. So we fit these uniquely coded metal rings, uniquely coded colour rings, so that we can read them in the field using binoculars or scopes without needing to catch them. So in 2020, we ringed 76, and since the beginning of the project we cited 15, most of which was in 2020. And all this data helps to gain an idea of their movements between the farms, site fidelity, adult survival, and how polygamous they are. And I'll go into polygamy a bit further on in the presentation. Now, it's a very important species as they've declined. They're one of the most declined farmland birds, but we're beginning to see a slow increase in areas of West Oxfordshire. So nest recording. This is a corn bunting nest, in fact, and most of the birds that we monitor are ground nesting birds. Most farmland birds are, but also ground nesting birds are the most vulnerable to human activities, whether that's just the public or farming activities or whatever. So what do we record? Well, we record the location and the habitat where the nest was found, the clutch size, so the number of eggs, the brood size, again, number of chicks. We also ring the nestlings. The outcome of the nesting attempt is documented, so whether it was successful or whether it failed, and the reason behind why we think it might have failed. And we record the dates of each nest stage. In 2020, we found 196 nests. So this year, we're going to try and aim for 200. We were a bit short last year. And we found, I think, a large proportion of the corn bunting nests monitored nationally in West Oxfordshire. So we're doing a really good job at finding corn bunting nests and monitoring this species. So what does nest data tell us? Well, it can obviously tell us the number of breeding pairs on a farm, the breeding success of each species, the average clutch and brood size, the number of chicks that fledge on average for each species, the average time from eggs laid to chicks fledging, and the most important is the preferred nesting location. So we gain a lot of insight into where birds prefer to nest during the summer, and we can then go to the farmers to show them where they nest and perhaps talk to them about how they can improve that habitat, create more, or leave it undisturbed during the summer to reduce any disturbance to nesting birds. So, for example, at one farm in the Thames Valley, we did a lot of work with the farmer trying to find rebunting and whitethroat, sedge warblers and yellowhammer nests in particular. And we found a lot of them were nesting very close to streams or margins of fields and hedges where the grass was a lot taller and undisturbed. So we were able to talk to this farmer, and they were really happy to leave the margins undisturbed and uncut throughout the whole breeding season. So it's a really good job by the farmer there. So focusing on corn buntings again, as this is a bird that we really focus on over the past few years, and especially during 2020. So we did a lot of work on working out where they prefer to nest, and we found out something we weren't quite expecting. We thought they would nest predominantly in crops. However, we found most of them nested in the stewardship margins you can see on the bottom right below these windmills in this instance. So in 2020 we found 14 nests, 4 of which were in crops, 8 of which were in these wildflower plots, which are under stewardship agreement with the farmer, who manages them very well, and 2 in fact in the solar farm field just shown on top right. So we also found out a lot about the parenting. The males we saw barely did anything for the chicks, while the females did almost all of the work. We also discovered a lot about how much these birds are disturbed. So a lot of people would say, well, it's the farming practices that disturb them most. That's true to a certain extent. When they nest in the crops, they can often be quite prone to disturbance, especially during the earlier harvest of winter-sown barley, which can often destroy or disturb breeding pairs and nests. However, during 2020 especially, there was a lot more public in the countryside, which is brilliant. It's brilliant to see more people engaging with the countryside. However, a lot of people were straying from the footpath, and this did have a rather large effect on the dynamics of the corn bunting population at this farm in particular. So a lot of males were pushed off of their natural territories where we've seen them in previous years. And this had quite an effect on the number of pairs. We think there was a slight decline in 2020. We also get an idea of the number of broods they have. So on places like Salisbury Plain, where there's almost limitless amount of undisturbed grassland, where we often do a bit of surveying for other people, they will have about 3 broods on the Salisbury Plain. However, up here in West Oxfordshire, where there's not quite so much undisturbed grassland, they tend to have 1 or 2 broods. So again, we can talk to the farmer in this instance and see whether they can provide more undisturbed grassland to increase the number of broods that each corn bunting pair can have. So monitoring barn owls is one of our aims. So far we've put up 34 nest boxes and hope to put up another 8 this year, and this is of indoor and outdoor designs, so 2 different designs depending on where they go. We tend to concentrate them in areas containing rough grassland, which is their preferred hunting habitat, is where rodents prefer to live. We ring the chicks in the nest box and also the adults, as they'll often use the nest box to roost in during the winter. And this provides data on the breeding success, adult survival and movements. And recently it's had quite a lot of success, as a few farmers have been coming to us to ask what they can do to provide better habitat for them. So we often just advise them if they can put out more rough grassland that's cut between every 3 and 4 years, would be the optimum sort of management. We also do this in conjunction with the Oxfordshire Ornithological Society, which also already has a very successful nest box project around where we work. So final monitoring method we use is observational counts, and this is as part of the BTO's bird track scheme. We do this at least once a month, or whenever we just visit to stock up supplementary feeding stations during the winter, or whenever we're on a farm carrying out nest monitoring during the summer. So how do observational counts supplement bird ringing surveys? So I've already said bird ringing can provide us with so much data on the dynamics and population dynamics. So what can observational counts do? Well, firstly, they can help us document individual notable species, such as stonechats or even merlins and tree pipits, that are often in such low numbers that we're unable to catch them, so they would be otherwise underrepresented if we just did bird ringing. It also allows us to record flock sizes for large numbers of birds, such as fieldfares, redwings and starlings, which can flock in the thousands or even more in some instances. And in these species, we're just unable to capture a large enough representative data set. And finally, observational counts ensure coverage of species usually difficult to catch. So as I said, corn buntings, skylarks, most wildfowl, so ducks, and also waders. And in the instance of corn buntings, as I've said, we can get over this through ringing of corn buntings with the uniquely coded colourings. So finally, what can this data do? Why do we collect it? How can it help in practice in the field? Well, as I've said, we provide all our data directly to the farmers for each farm, and this helps to build a really strong relationship with them, engage with them, and this is how we can eventually help to advise on habitat creation and management. Because in the short term, feeding and nest box vision is good to bump up the population of certain species, but we really need habitat improvements for long-term gain. And this is only possible, it's only possible to engage the farmers if we have this strong relationship. And by taking the farmers out to show them nests, to show them the birds in the hand when we're bird ringing, we build this strong relationship with them. And increasingly, as the project has grown, more farmers have got involved, and most of the farmers know each other by now. So they begin to get a bit of bird envy between them. There's a bit of healthy competitiveness between each farm, and this can nudge some farmers to do a bit more for the birds on their farm, a bit more competitiveness between the farms, which is great to see. We also had a rather nice instance during the summer of 2020 when we showed one of the farmer's sons one of the nests we had found, one of the swallow nests and a yellowhammer nest. And the next day he came to us to ask where he should avoid driving his tractor and where he should avoid disturbing the margins. So it's great to see some of this data that we collected getting to the next generation of farmers. So the data also goes to scientific research and then national and regional databases, so the BTO's database, and also the Thames Valley Environmental Record Centre database. And this, as I said, goes towards scientific research, which can then inform policy making for agri-environmental stewardship schemes and the soon, hopefully, environmental land management scheme. So I'd just like to finish by saying big thanks to the farmers, landowners, gamekeepers and volunteers who have helped to set up and run the project, without which it would not be possible to carry on. And a special thanks to the RSPB, TOW, Thames Valley Environmental Record Centre and British Birds for helping to fund the project. So thank you for listening.